Leonard Grayson could practically feel the warmth in the air as he set down his cards. It was a late Friday night at Kevin and Bianca Cross's home, where the faint scent of baked cinnamon rolls still drifted from the kitchen. A deck of playing cards, a half-filled bottle of Pinot Noir, and the easy laughter of good friends made it feel like life couldn't get any better. "Leonard, you're holding out on us, aren't you?" Bianca teased, tapping the table. She wore a vibrant red sweater that clashed charmingly with the warm yellow walls. Helen, Leonard's wife of nearly 30 years, giggled at Bianca's remark and clinked her wine glass with her own. Leonard opened his mouth to deliver a playful comeback, but something gripped his chest. A sharp, invisible hand squeezed his ribcage. He blinked, surprised. The first wave of pain subsided as quickly as it came, leaving him momentarily confused. "You okay, hun?" Helen asked, catching the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. She was about to slide her chair closer when Kevin, who was not only Leonard's close friend but also a physician, leaned forward. "Hey, Leo, you look a bit pale," Kevin said, his voice calm but urgent. "Are you feeling all right?" Leonard wanted to say he was fine, yet the words jammed in his throat. A second stab of pain jolted him, fiercer this time. The cards in his hand trembled, and sweat beaded on his forehead. He tried to inhale, but the air felt thick. Bianca stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Let me get you some water," she offered, hurrying to the kitchen. Helen's eyes darted from her husband to Kevin, anxiety filling her face. Leonard pressed a hand against his chest. It felt as though his heart had decided to play its own game, one with much higher stakes. Kevin sprang into action. "Helen, call 911, right now." As Helen fumbled with her phone, the laughter around the table turned into hushed tension. The air crackled with worry, as if an ominous gust of wind had swept through the room. Bianca rushed back with a glass of water, but Leonard barely noticed. The pain was too intense. All at once, memories flared across Leonard's mind. The day he first saw Helen in a white summer dress, their wedding, holding their first child in his arms, the expansions of his family's business, Southeast Aerotech. The swirling recollections came in snapshots, like an old film reel playing at high speed. "Stay calm, buddy," Kevin murmured, pressing 2 fingers against Leonard's pulse and slipping a cuff over his arm to measure blood pressure. "Ambulance is on the way." Helen hovered close, her hand on Leonard's shoulder, trying to steady both of them. "You're gonna be okay," she whispered, voice trembling. Leonard's vision began to blur. The edges of the room darkened. In the distance, sirens wailed. Within minutes, although it felt like an eternity, a team of EMTs burst through the front door, medical equipment clattering. They swiftly positioned Leonard onto a stretcher. Helen followed, nearly stumbling over her own feet, her thoughts spiraling. "His pulse is rapid and irregular," Kevin explained to the paramedics, stepping aside so they could stabilize Leonard. "Severe chest pains about 10 minutes ago." Helen didn't want to leave him for even a second. All the wine and laughter from just moments before felt like a past life. "I'm riding with him," she insisted, voice shaking as she climbed into the ambulance. As the red and blue lights flashed across the suburban street, neighbors peeked out their curtains, silhouettes flickering in windows. Inside the speeding ambulance, Leonard's consciousness wavered. Helen stroked his hair, her heart pounding. He forced his eyes open, catching sight of Helen's tear-streaked face. In his mind, he clung to the memory of her bright smile, the same one that had lit up his life for 3 decades. The harsh overhead light glared down, reflecting off medical instruments as the paramedics barked instructions. Outside, the night sky hung low, starless, a silent witness to Leonard's crisis. The ambulance streaked through traffic lights, siren echoing a warning to the world. Every lurch, every bump on the road made Helen cringe, terrified that the jolt might break her husband's fragile hold on consciousness. By the time they reached St. Matthew's Hospital, Leonard was drifting in and out of a haze. Fluorescent lights burned overhead as he was rushed into the ER. White-clad doctors and nurses scrambled, hooking him up to monitors, starting IVs, running tests. Helen felt rooted to the spot, eyes wide, hands trembling. She couldn't process the swirl of urgent voices, the beeping machines, the metallic tang of disinfectant. Minutes later, though it felt like hours, a doctor glanced in Helen's direction with something resembling reassurance. "He's still with us," she said quietly, leading Helen to the hallway. We need to move him to the cardiac ICU. We'll do everything we can. Helen nodded, numb. The world seemed to freeze, then splinter. Her husband was alive, but precariously so. With a shaky breath, she folded her arms around herself. The last half hour had uprooted her perfectly stable life. A single, unexpected moment had blown it all wide open. Helen leaned against the cold steel railing of Leonard's bed, her eyes fixed on his face. The cardiac ICU was eerily quiet except for the steady hum of machines and the faint beep of his heart monitor. Through a small window, early morning sunlight peeked in, casting soft shadows across the polished linoleum floor. Leonard's complexion was pallid, a stark contrast to the healthy man who'd been playfully shuffling cards just hours earlier. Helen reached for his hand, heart clenching at how still he lay. Every second felt fragile. She closed her eyes and let her thoughts drift back in time nearly 30 years of marriage, from a spur-of-the-moment road trip up the California coast to the nights they'd spent laughing at reruns in their cramped first apartment. She remembered the day Leonard took over Southeast Aerotech, the Grayson family's pride, determined to expand it beyond anything his predecessors had imagined. The doctor's voice broke her reverie. "Mrs. Grayson, can we have a minute?" A young physician with calm, measured tones stepped into the room. Helen stood, forcing herself to listen despite the swirl of dread. "We've run a series of tests. Your husband suffered an acute myocardial infarction, a severe heart attack. He's stable at the moment, but..." The doctor's gaze was gentle. "Stress is a critical factor. We strongly recommend he adopts a low-stress routine, a strict diet. He'll also need to avoid strenuous physical activities including, well, anything that could overly raise his heart rate for at least several months." Helen inhaled, trying to keep her voice steady. "I understand," she said, a quiet tremor betraying her fear. "He'll do whatever it takes." As soon as the doctor left, Helen resumed her post at Leonard's side. He stirred, eyelids fluttering open as if awakening from a long dream. Helen's relief was immediate. "Hey," she whispered, stroking his hair. "You're okay?" Leonard's eyes, dark with exhaustion, flickered around the room. "Feels like I got hit by a truck," he rasped, voice weak. "How long have I been out?" "Most of the night," Helen replied, trying to muster a smile. "Doctors say you need to rest, watch your blood pressure, avoid any emotional upheaval." He managed a faint grin. "So, no more card games, huh?" Helen's chest tightened at his attempt to joke. "We'll go slow," she assured him, voice catching. "One day at a time." Outside the room, she could see Kevin speaking quietly with a nurse. He gave her a nod of encouragement through the glass door. She was thankful for his and Bianca's support, true friends who'd stayed all night at the hospital, waiting for any update. Leonard's eyelids fluttered again, heavy with sedation. As he drifted off, Helen gently placed her hand on his chest, feeling the comforting thump of his heart beneath the thin hospital gown. Relief mingled with anxiety. He was alive, but how would they adjust to the new normal? An hour later, Helen stepped into the hallway to stretch her legs. She dialed home and left a message for her children. Marcus would be the first to arrive. He lived closest to the hospital. Her younger son, Noah, was in his final year of college, and Chloe, her daughter, had recently moved into her own apartment. She tried to keep her voice calm, but the tears welled up again as she explained the situation. "Mom?" came a quick response from Marcus's phone. Helen exhaled, relieved to hear his voice. "I'm already on my way." By the time Marcus arrived, the morning sun had climbed higher, illuminating the ICU's pale green corridors. He rushed in, setting his jacket on a nearby chair before hugging Helen tightly. "How is he?" Helen closed her eyes, hugging her eldest child back. "Stable. We just have to be careful from now on." A few minutes later, a nurse directed them to step out while the medical team adjusted Leonard's IV lines and took more vitals. Helen paced the corridor, noticing how each moment stretched in silent dread. The ICU's climate-controlled air felt dry and artificial, a far cry from the warmth of her home. "Marcus, can you help at the office for a few days?" Helen asked softly. "I know your dad's going to worry about how everything's running." "Of course," Marcus agreed without hesitation. "I've been handling the basics while Dad's out. But I'll call Aunt Linda. She's been at Aerotech for ages. She'll know how to keep things afloat. Helen glanced back through the glass panel. She saw Leonard's still form, hooked to tubes and monitors, and her pulse pounded at the thought of losing him. Over the past 3 decades, he'd been her rock, her anchor. Now the tide had turned. "Mom," Marcus said gently, "go get some rest." "Go? You've been up all night. I can't leave him. Just a nap at home or in the waiting lounge. You'll collapse if you keep going like this." She wanted to argue, but realized he was right. "I'll stay near," she relented, "in case he wakes up again soon." As she wandered back into the room, the faint beep of the monitor felt like a beacon of hope, still irregular, but steady enough to keep her heart from falling apart. She touched Leonard's arm, a silent promise to stand by his side through whatever came next, no matter the sacrifice. Helen returned to the hospital the next morning, the smell of antiseptic and coffee mixing in the hallways. She carried a small bag of homemade soup, hoping Leonard might manage a few spoonfuls. If someone had told her 2 days ago that her confident, energetic husband would be tethered to an ICU bed, she would have laughed. Now each footstep felt heavy with dread. Inside room 312, Leonard was awake, propped up on pillows. Though paler than usual, he managed a half smile. "I thought they were letting me out soon," he said, voice still rough. Helen exhaled in relief. "The doctor wants to keep you under observation for another day or two, just to be safe." A nurse poked her head in, reminding them that daily tests were scheduled for noon. Helen nodded politely, then set the soup on a tray near the bed. "I made your favorite chicken and rice." "Sounds good," Leonard murmured, letting his eyes drift over her face. "Thank you." She noticed the lines of strain around his mouth and felt a pang of concern. Desperate to lighten the mood, she forced a small grin. "When you're fully recovered, we could celebrate. Maybe a relaxing trip. I was thinking somewhere with a beach." Leonard's eyes momentarily lit up. "Sure, a beach. I can handle lying around in the sun. Just no extreme sports, I guess." He tried to laugh but grimaced, clutching his chest. After a moment, he sighed. "We'll have to be careful. Doctors say I need to avoid anything that might spike my heart rate." Helen's gaze flickered with subtle disappointment, but she hid it. "Right. No worries," she said softly, placing a hand over his. The mild beep of the heart monitor filled the silence. She cleared her throat. "I'm just happy you're here." Leonard nodded, voice subdued. "We'll manage." He paused, then gave a faint, hopeful smile. "Once I'm out, we'll have that trip. Promise." She held his gaze, offering a gentle squeeze of reassurance. Yet beneath her relief lurked a restless undercurrent and awareness that the man she'd known, so full of vitality, was suddenly fragile. And with that fragility came a different kind of tension, one she'd never felt before. Late that afternoon, Helen prepared to leave when a sympathetic nurse helped Leonard settle for a nap. As she walked down the corridor, her phone buzzed. It was Chloe. "Mom, how's Dad?" Chloe asked. Her tone carried that casual confidence Helen had come to expect. "Marcus said he's stable." "Better, yes, but it's serious, Chloe. He's got months of recovery ahead." Chloe fell silent before replying, "I'm coming to see him this weekend. Just let me know if you need anything in the meantime." Helen thanked her, then ended the call, stepping outside into the crisp air. Though it was early spring, the breeze felt oddly sharp against her skin, like a subtle warning. She closed her eyes, letting the late afternoon sun warm her cheeks. A wave of exhaustion washed over her. Instead of driving straight home, Helen decided to drop by a nearby tennis club to clear her head. She didn't plan on playing. She just wanted to watch a few matches from the stands, breathe in the fresh air, and momentarily forget the mechanical beeps and antiseptic smell that now defined her days. She took a seat on a wooden bench by the fence. On the green court below, players whacked the ball back and forth, the thunk of racket against ball rhythmic and oddly calming. After a few minutes, her stiff shoulders began to relax. But then, a sharp twinge shot across her lower back, making her gasp. She winced, rubbing the spot. It was a reminder that she too carried stress in her body, stress from nights of poor sleep and endless worry. You okay there? A voice called out behind her. Helen turned to see a lean man with short, dark hair and a friendly smile. He looked to be in his early 40s. I'm fine, she said, clearing her throat. Just a sore back. He took a step forward. Name's Dominic Fowler. I'm a physical therapist. Want me to take a quick look? Helen tensed, uncertain if she should accept help from a stranger. But the ache in her back flared again, and after the swirl of medical chaos she'd witnessed, the word therapist sounded like a safe haven. That's very kind of you, she finally managed, forcing a polite grin. Though I don't want to interrupt your time. Dominic shrugged casually. I work with a lot of athletes here. Doesn't take long to see if it's just a pulled muscle. She hesitated. All right. She nodded, stepping aside by the fence. In just a few practiced moves, Dominic pressed gently along her spine, asking if it hurt here or there. His hands were sure and confident. Helen exhaled as a small knot in her lower back loosened. Wow, that actually helped. Dominic chuckled. I have a clinic on the other side of town. If you need more thorough help, come see me. Reaching into his duffel bag, he pulled out a business card. Give me a call. I specialize in stress-related tension, too. Helen stared at the card, a flicker of relief crossing her face. Thanks, she said, sliding the card into her purse. I might just do that. As she left the tennis club, a swirl of conflicting emotions chased her. She felt guilt at how her tense body, her longing for normalcy, had momentarily overshadowed Leonard's crisis. But she also felt a small spark of hope that maybe, in the middle of everything, she could find some relief. A week later, the hospital finally discharged Leonard into Helen's care. The morning sun filtered through the living room windows as Marcus and Noah helped their father settle into a new adjustable bed. Helen had positioned it near a large window facing the backyard so Leonard could watch the bird feeders and the swaying trees. You need anything else, Dad? Noah asked, concern evident in his tone. He was just finishing college and looked overwhelmed by the sudden reminder of mortality. Leonard patted Noah's arm. I'm good, son. Just a bit tired. He tried to manage a smile. Thank you, guys. Helen fussed around the room, arranging pillows, checking the bedside table for water, medication bottles, and a notepad to log Leonard's vitals. A gentle beep came from a portable heart monitor the hospital insisted he use for a few days. As Marcus and Noah said their farewells, both heading back to their day-to-day responsibilities, Helen sank onto a small sofa across from Leonard's bed. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion evident. Though it was a relief to have him home, the responsibility pressed down like a heavy weight. Leonard glanced at her. Come here, he said softly, reaching out his hand. She scooted closer, curling her fingers around his. You've barely slept. I'll be fine, she replied, though her voice trembled. She studied her husband's face. He looked weaker than he used to, a shadow of the man who'd handled half a dozen tasks at once without breaking a sweat. I'm just glad you're not in the hospital anymore. He nodded, then sighed. Doc said no strenuous activity. That includes, His voice trailed off in awkwardness. Helen swallowed. She knew exactly what he meant. The usual intimacy they shared was now off-limits. She had read the pamphlets and listened to the doctors. Still, hearing him say it made her heart twist. We'll get through it, she murmured, doing her best to sound upbeat. Later that afternoon, with Leonard dozing lightly, Helen's phone vibrated. She slipped into the hallway to answer it. The caller ID showed Chloe. Mom, how is Dad? Chloe asked, her tone bright but edged with concern. Helen sighed, leaning against the wall. He's okay, as good as can be expected. We have to be careful, no stress, no overexertion. Chloe hesitated. Are you holding up? Don't burn yourself out, Mom. You deserve some self-care, too. Helen let out a small laugh, albeit a tired one. I appreciate that. It's just a lot. A friend of mine tried a few therapy sessions for stress relief, Chloe mentioned, her words careful. It worked wonders, just something to consider. Helen recalled Dominic's card still tucked in her purse. She wasn't sure if she'd actually contact him, but the tension in her own back had returned, a dull reminder that worry had a physical cost. I'll think about it, she said quietly. They hung up and Helen returned to the living room. She found Leonard awake, absently scrolling through cable channels. "Anything good on?" she asked, trying to keep the conversation light. He shrugged. "Nothing interesting, just old sitcoms." Helen picked up a folded blanket and draped it over his legs. Then she caught her own reflection in the TV's black screen when Leonard switched it off. She looked older, wearier. That evening, after making Leonard a simple dinner of steamed vegetables and grilled chicken, approved by his new cardiac diet, Helen scrolled through her phone. Dominic's business card was on the coffee table. Could a simple back therapy session help ease her strain? Possibly. But the guilt of even thinking about her own needs tugged at her. Leonard was the priority, always. Standing by the window, she stared into the backyard. Dusk was settling in, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. Shadows lengthened across the grass, and the garden lights flicked on automatically. She could almost feel the tension between the warm glow of home and the looming darkness of fear for Leonard's health. Eventually, she made the call just to inquire, she told herself. Dominic answered on the second ring, his voice calm and reassuring. They arranged a brief assessment for later in the week. Helen felt her heart pound in that tiny moment of decision. She told herself it was purely practical. If she was too stressed or in pain, she couldn't care for Leonard properly. She set the phone down, glancing over at her husband, who had fallen asleep with the TV remote still in his hand. A sense of unease fluttered through her. Their life had changed so drastically in just days. She didn't yet realize how much more it could change. Sunlight streamed through the wide glass doors of Fowler Physical Therapy, illuminating the pale blue walls and rows of framed sports memorabilia. A subtle scent of antiseptic hung in the air, reminiscent of a hospital but softer, like someone had lit a mild peppermint candle. Helen Grayson stood near the entrance, a nervous flutter in her stomach, clutching her purse as though it might slip away. She'd made the appointment with Dominic Fowler 2 days earlier. Now, she was both curious and uneasy, feeling as if she were stepping into a new world. It felt odd to be somewhere that wasn't centered around Leonard's recovery. She glanced around, noticing a few other patients waiting on padded chairs. A receptionist, a bright-eyed woman named Monique, offered Helen a friendly smile. "Hi there," Monique said. "You must be Helen Grayson. Dominic's almost ready for you." Helen nodded. "Thanks." She forced a polite smile, then pretended to read a pamphlet about back pain. Her mind, however, was on Leonard, who was at home, resting in the adjustable bed. She felt an invisible weight pressing down on her, reminding her she shouldn't be here, but her back still ached, and stress had tangled her muscles into knots. This was strictly therapy, she reminded herself. "Mrs. Grayson?" Dominic's voice echoed from the hallway, deep and pleasant. Dressed in navy blue scrubs and white sneakers, he exuded a confidence that set him apart from the typical staid medical professional. Helen followed him into a private treatment room, separated from the rest of the facility by frosted glass partitions. Inside, there was a cushioned table, an ultrasound machine in the corner, and a couple of posters showing muscle groups and joint structures. Dominic nodded at the table. "Go ahead, have a seat. We'll talk through what's bothering you." Helen complied, smoothing out the edge of her blouse. "It's my lower back," she explained, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "Ever since my husband's health scare, I've been under a lot of tension. Guess it settled in my back." Dominic's gaze was professional yet warm. "You did mention stress the other day at the tennis courts. Let me see what we're dealing with." Helen removed her light cardigan and lay down on her stomach. Dominic carefully placed his hands along her spine, pressing down with gentle but firm motions. She winced slightly at first contact. Her muscles were sensitive. But after a few moments, there was a comforting warmth in his touch. "How does that feel?" he asked, leaning in to check her reaction. A soft sigh escaped Helen. "Actually, relief," she admitted. "It's been so tense." "I can tell," Dominic said, voice low. "Feels like your back muscles are coiled tight, like a spring ready to snap." His fingers pressed again, encouraging the tension to release. She closed her eyes, letting herself focus on the rhythmic pressure. In the dim overhead lighting, she could almost pretend this was just normal therapy, nothing else. Yet there was a subtle tingle in the pit of her stomach that she couldn't ignore. Not exactly attraction, or was it? She shook the thought away, chastising herself. After about 20 minutes of methodical stretching and light massage, Dominic stepped back. "That's a good start," he said. "But to really tackle this, I recommend multiple sessions. Maybe twice a week at first?" Helen pushed herself up on her elbows. Twice a week. She hesitated. That would mean regularly visiting a man she barely knew and who made her heart race for reasons she couldn't fully admit. But the tension in her back didn't lie. "Okay," she finally agreed. Dominic flashed a satisfied smile. "We'll also teach you some exercises. I've got a list." He handed her a small folder. "But you need to be consistent, Helen. Stress is tricky, it builds up if we don't release it." She swallowed, nodding as she accepted the paperwork. "I understand," she said, her voice quieter than usual. He stepped toward the door. "I'll leave you to get ready. Monique can schedule your next sessions. Let me know if you have any concerns." Once he left, Helen exhaled, a surge of conflicting emotions coursing through her. She felt lighter physically, but internally, guilt prickled at her conscience. That sense of guilt worsened as she remembered Leonard's face, exhausted, hopeful, counting on her unwavering support. A few minutes later, she signed up at the front desk for a series of sessions, each one a stepping stone on a path that she wasn't entirely sure she should walk. As she exited the clinic, the California sun felt too bright, reflecting off the glass doors and momentarily blinding her. She squinted and hurried to her car, her pulse thudding in her ears. Sliding behind the wheel, Helen forced a shaky smile at her own reflection in the rearview mirror. "It's just physical therapy," she whispered under her breath, as though trying to convince herself. Yet the small folder resting on the passenger seat seemed to speak otherwise, promising repeated visits to a man whose presence was already stirring something deep within her. Late evening sunlight slanted through the Graysons' living room windows, painting the walls in golden hues. A gentle breeze stirred the sheer curtains, bringing in the faint scent of jasmine from Helen's front garden. Inside, though, the atmosphere felt weighty. Leonard sat in a recliner that Marcus had set up for him. He looked thinner and still worn from his hospital stay, yet he mustered a warm smile as Helen walked over to him. "Hey," she said softly, placing a cup of decaf tea on the side table. "How's your chest feeling?" Leonard sighed, rotating his stiff shoulders. "Better than last week. The doctors say progress is slow, but steady." He eyed her face. "You look tired. Everything okay?" Helen hesitated. She recalled that day's session with Dominic, his firm hands, the gentle release of tension, the swirl of emotions she'd tried to forget on her drive home. "I'm fine, just errands," she replied, steering the conversation away from therapy. "And some grocery shopping." Leonard nodded, though his brow creased. "You need to take care of yourself too, Helen." "I will," she answered, forcing a smile. "Don't worry." A moment later, her phone buzzed in her purse. She tensed and casually angled her body away, fishing it out to see a text from Dominic Fowler. "Everything okay after today's session? Don't forget your stretches." She felt a tiny jolt of adrenaline and quickly locked the screen before Leonard could notice. She turned back, setting the phone face down on the kitchen counter. "I'll be right back," she muttered, trying to act nonchalant. Once in the hallway, she tapped out a quick reply. "All good, thank you. Will do." Then, mindful of Leonard's presence, she erased the text chain. The subtle secrecy knotted her stomach. Why did she feel as if she were doing something wrong? When she returned, Leonard was flipping through TV channels, searching for a light sitcom. Helen perched on the arm of his chair, pressing her palm gently against his shoulder. "Any plans for tomorrow?" she asked, hoping to sound casual. He shrugged. "Marcus is visiting to talk about the company's projects. I'll try to do a short walk outside if I can manage it." A crooked smile touched his lips. "I miss being active." A pang of sympathy shot through her. Leonard had always been full of energy leading staff meetings at Southeast Aerotech, jogging around the neighborhood. Now he was confined mostly to the house, avoiding stress of any kind, including intimacy. Helen quickly banished that last thought. She tried to lighten the mood. "Let's watch something funny tonight. Maybe an old comedy?" Leonard agreed, though they both sensed the unspoken tensions. As the hours slipped by, they settled in front of the TV, but Helen's mind drifted away from the canned laughter on the screen. She found herself checking her phone every so often, a subtle habit that made her feel guilty but also strangely expectant. Just after 9 o'clock, Leonard dozed off in the recliner. The gentle rise and fall of his chest indicated a peaceful sleep. Standing nearby, Helen brushed a lock of his hair aside, marveling at how fragile he looked. She wished she could ease his anxiety, or conjure a magic cure to restore him to full vigor. But even that longing carried a note of exhaustion. She was only human. Gathering her phone again, Helen wandered into the kitchen, tidying up half-finished cups of tea and a scattered newspaper. A text from her daughter, Chloe, appeared. "Hey, Mom, how's Dad? Call me tomorrow, okay?" Helen typed back a quick response, nothing too detailed, just that Leonard was resting. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in the microwave's shiny surface. Lines of worry creased her face. Her hair, once neatly styled, now fell in a messy tumble around her shoulders, evidence of her current turmoil. As she stood there, the front porch light flicked on automatically, triggered by the dusk. It cast a muted glow across the living room, illuminating the difference between Leonard's slow, pained existence and the swirl of complicated emotions inside her. In some ways, Helen felt she was living in two separate worlds, one devoted to her husband's careful recovery, and another where Dominic's presence sparked a sense of newness she struggled to define. Eventually, she turned off the TV and gently nudged Leonard awake, helping him shuffle to bed. She lingered a moment, making sure he'd taken his medications, waiting until his eyes closed again. Then, she stepped into the guest bathroom for a moment of quiet. Her phone lay face down on the sink counter, a silent reminder of a life she never expected to lead. For now, she pushed it away, determined to focus on Leonard. Tomorrow, though, she would return to Dominic's clinic. She could already feel the subtle tremor of excitement and shame threading through her veins. Helen felt a tingle of anticipation the moment she parked outside Fowler Physical Therapy late that afternoon. Low clouds stretched across the sky, casting gray shadows over the lot. The whole day at home had been anxious. Leonard's half-dozing presence, the unspoken tension between them, and her own nerves about this appointment. Just therapy, she whispered to herself, stepping out of the car. A gust of wind whipped her hair as she slid on a light jacket. Her heart thudded a little harder than usual. Inside, Monique greeted her with a quick smile, then pointed down the corridor. "Dominic said you could head straight to room 3. Helen nodded, walking on plush carpeting that muffled her footsteps. Room 3 was cozy. A soft lamp in the corner replaced the harsh overhead lights. The faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. Dominic stood there in a neatly pressed polo shirt and track pants, rolling up his sleeves. "Long day?" he asked, noticing the shadows under Helen's eyes. She managed a tight smile. "You could say that." He inclined his head toward the treatment table, patting it lightly. "Let's get you lying down. I want to do some deeper work on that lower back." Helen slipped off her jacket, draping it over a chair. The moment she settled onto the table, she was hyper-aware of Dominic's presence, the faint sound of his breathing. For the first few minutes, he pressed along her spine and sides with measured precision. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave her body. "It's a lot worse than last time," Dominic muttered, gently kneading a tight knot near her waist. "What's changed?" Helen hesitated. "Nothing, really. Just my husband's still not well," she finally said. "It's wearing on me." Dominic's hands paused. "I get it. Stress can be sneaky. You push through life's pressures until your body can't hold it anymore." His tone was soothing, but there was an underlying current, like he was walking a tightrope of professionalism and something else. Her heart pounded. She told herself this was just a clinical moment, that the rising heat she felt was only from the pressure on her muscles. And maybe it was. At least, that's what she wanted to believe. As the session went on, Dominic's touch grew more deliberate. The room seemed to shrink around them, the lamp's glow creating an intimate cocoon of light. Helen caught his gaze flick to her face, as if searching for a signal. Her mind buzzed with conflicting thoughts. This was therapy, but also more. At one point, he leaned in, hands moving up to her shoulders. She shifted on the table, trying to breathe steadily, but the closeness was overwhelming. Her hair brushed against his forearm, and he paused. "You okay?" he asked softly, voice barely above a whisper. Helen nodded, not trusting her own voice. She turned her head slightly, and their eyes met. It felt like a spark ignited the air around them. And then it happened so quickly, and yet somehow so inevitable. Dominic bent toward her, lips skimming her cheek before pressing to hers. For a second, Helen froze, heart hammering in her ears. She thought about Leonard, about their marriage, about the vow she'd made to stand by him in sickness and in health. But her body responded on a visceral level, drawn to the electric current of Dominic's closeness. She let out a shaky breath, returning the kiss before pulling back abruptly. I shouldn't," she began, but the words caught in her throat. The tension swirling between them was almost visible, like a storm cloud in the corner of the room. Dominic swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he murmured, stepping back. But there was no mistaking the hunger in his gaze. Helen slid off the table, feeling the floor tilt under her feet. Her cheeks burned. "It's fine," she said, though her voice shook. She fumbled for her jacket, adrenaline surging. She barely remembered snatching up her purse. Dominic reached out gently, but she sidestepped him, face hot with confusion and guilt. "Helen?" She shook her head, breath ragged. I need to go." In a matter of seconds, she bolted out of the clinic, ignoring Monique's curious stare as she rushed past the front desk. The air outside felt cold against her flushed skin. She breathed in huge gulps, hands trembling, keys clattering when she unlocked her car. Slamming the car door shut, Helen gripped the steering wheel, heart pounding like a drum. Shame and undeniable exhilaration warred inside her. How had she let it get this far? This was no longer just tension release or innocent therapy. A line had been crossed. For a minute, she simply sat there, tears of confusion gathering at the corners of her eyes. Then she wiped them away and started the engine. The sky, now cloaked in dusk, seemed to mirror her mood, dark, uncertain, alive with unspoken possibilities. She drove home in silence, each mile stretching the distance between the life she'd always known and whatever road she'd unknowingly begun to travel. At a red light, she pressed a hand against her chest, feeling her heart throb as if it were whispering, "There's no going back." Night had fallen by the time Helen pulled into her driveway. A solitary porch light illuminated the path to the front door, casting shadows on the potted ferns that lined the steps. She hesitated, keys in hand, as though stepping inside might confirm her betrayal. Finally, she forced herself to turn the knob and enter. Leonard was in the living room, half asleep on the recliner with the TV muted in the background. The flickering screen lit up his face in irregular pulses. Helen's stomach lurched with guilt the instant she saw him. He was so vulnerable, his health still precarious, his trust in her unwavering. She cleared her throat gently. "Leonard?" she asked, voice low. His eyes fluttered open. "You're back," he mumbled, reaching for the remote to shut off the TV. A weak smile curved his lips. "I tried waiting up." Helen swallowed, nodding. "Traffic was heavy," she lied, crossing the room to help him up. She tried not to flinch when he took her hand. A wave of shame crashed over her, recalling Dominic's kiss just hours earlier. Once Leonard was stable on his feet, Helen guided him to the bedroom. He still moved slowly, leaning on her arm. She noticed how his breathing grew shallow after a few steps, a reminder that his heart wasn't fully recovered. "You okay?" she murmured, adjusting the pillows. Leonard winced slightly. "Yeah, just a bit winded." Then he looked at her, concern in his eyes. "You seem off tonight. Did something happen?" Her pulse quickened. She forced an almost too bright smile. "Nothing. I'm just tired." He nodded, clearly unconvinced but too drained to probe further. Within minutes, he was lying down, drifting toward sleep. Helen flicked off the bedside lamp, leaving only a small nightlight glowing in the corner. Standing in the dim room, she watched Leonard's chest rise and fall. A swirl of emotions tightened her chest, tenderness, sorrow, guilt, and a confusing sliver of longing for the rush she'd felt at Dominic's clinic. It was all she could do not to collapse under the weight of it. She left, stepping back into the living room. The silence of the house pressed in on her. She caught her reflection in a mirror above the mantel, eyes shadowed with fatigue, lips parted as though she might say something if there were anyone to listen. But nobody was there. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the stillness. She snatched it up, heart pounding, half expecting Dominic's name to appear. Instead, it was Chloe. With trembling fingers, she answered, "Hey, sweetheart. Mom, is everything okay? You sound weird." Chloe's tone was casual but laced with curiosity. Helen perched on the sofa's edge, forcing her voice steady. "I'm fine, just worried about your dad. It's an adjustment." Chloe sighed. "I get it. Look, I know it's tough, but you have to take care of yourself too. A friend of mine tried acupuncture for stress. Maybe that's something you could—" Helen cut her off gently, not wanting to discuss more therapy. "I'll consider it," she said. "Thank you, honey. We can talk later. I need to check on your dad." Chloe said goodnight, and the call ended. Setting the phone down, Helen struggled with an urge to confide in anyone about her confusion. But how could she? She envisioned Chloe's shock, or worse, condemnation. The betrayal would seem monstrous. In a restless daze, Helen walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and stared blankly at the shelves. She wasn't hungry. She just couldn't bear the gnawing emptiness in her chest. She closed the door, flicking off the overhead light, plunging the room into darkness. If only she could roll back time. But the memory of Dominic's mouth on hers lingered, igniting a flicker of yearning that made her feel hypocritical and alive all at once. No, she couldn't let it happen again. Leonard depended on her. Their marriage might be under strain, but it was still her anchor, wasn't it? Her mind spun with questions, none of which had an easy answer. Before heading to bed, she peeked in on Leonard once more. He looked peaceful in sleep, and she felt a rush of sorrow. Even though he was physically right there, a gulf now separated them. She realized that this new secret, this crossing of a forbidden line, would eat away at her carefully maintained life. Slipping out of the room, she retreated to the guest bedroom, claiming she didn't want to disturb his rest. Once there, she sank onto the bed, knees pulled to her chest. Outside, a faint wind rustled the hedges, but inside her head, a storm raged. She closed her eyes, trying to muffle the echo of Dominic's voice, the warmth of his touch. Tomorrow, she would see if she could bury it away, resume her role as dutiful wife and caregiver. But for now, the night felt long and unyielding, punctuated only by the soft hum of the house's air conditioning. Somewhere deep in her heart, a part of Helen recognized that the life she'd known, the comfortable routine with Leonard, was no longer the same. A single secret had taken root, and it would only grow in the darkness of her silence. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows of the Grayson home, casting long, soft beams on the hardwood floor. Leonard Grayson was determinedly walking laps around the sofa, wearing loose exercise pants and his doctor-recommended sneakers. His breaths were steady but cautious, like someone crossing a shaky bridge with no safety net. Nearby, the TV murmured softly with a daytime talk show that Leonard barely registered. He was focused on his physical therapy routine, as per his cardiologist's orders. Each careful step reminded him of how vulnerable he still was, but he was improving, slowly. In the hallway leading to the bedrooms, a sliver of light cut under the door to the master bedroom. Behind it stood Helen Grayson, phone tucked between her ear and shoulder as she folded laundry. She kept her voice low, her tone wavering between excitement and guilt. "Chloe, I know it's complicated," Helen whispered. I just can't stop seeing Dominic yet. I mean, his therapy is everything. He's more than just a therapist." She paused, biting her lip. "It's been intense, physically and well, you know. I told you I haven't been satisfied for months because your father can't—" Helen drew in a quick breath. "No, it's not that I don't care about Dad. Of course I do. But Dominic—" She stopped, cheeks flushing. "He gives me something I don't have at home right now." On the other side of the door, Leonard finished his slow circuit of the sofa and decided to grab a glass of water from the kitchen. But as he neared the bedroom, Helen's muffled words became clearer. Out of curiosity and concern, he wondered if Helen might be on the phone with her mother or one of the kids. He stepped closer. "Dominic satisfies me," Helen continued, her voice trembling with both longing and shame. "And I'm not sure if I can or want to stop yet." Leonard froze. A dizzying rush of confusion swept over him, each syllable stabbing deeper than the last. His pulse thudded loudly in his ears. Dominic? He recognized that name from fleeting mentions. Wasn't that the physical therapist? The man who texted her? "Satisfies me." Helen's words crushed him, turning the hallway into a swirling, suffocating tunnel. Inside the bedroom, Chloe's voice crackled through the speaker. "Mom, be careful. Dad's not strong right now. If he ever found out—" Helen sighed. "I know, but Dominic and it's not something I can quit overnight. I'm so stressed." Leonard's vision blurred. His chest tightened, heart pounding as if it might burst from sheer heartbreak. He stumbled back, stepping on the edge of the hallway rug. His bad leg gave out first. With a strangled gasp, he collapsed onto the floor, head spinning. Hearing a dull thud, Helen instantly cut off Chloe. "Hello? Hello?" She yanked the bedroom door open to see Leonard on his knees, one hand grasping his chest, the other splayed against the wall. "Leonard!" she cried, panic ripping through her. Phone still in hand, she rushed to him, voice frantic. "Oh God, Leonard, talk to me! Are you okay?" Leonard looked up, eyes clouded with raw anguish. "Helen, how could you?" His breath came in ragged gulps, as though every intake scorched his lungs. "I heard you." He tried to speak further, but choked, a wave of pain pulsing through his chest. Helen fumbled with her phone, dropping it in a scramble to dial 911. She pressed shaking fingers to Leonard's neck, feeling a rapid, erratic pulse. "Stay with me," she pleaded, tears threatening to spill. The operator's voice buzzed in her ear, and she relayed broken information about her husband's heart condition. Moments later, the wailing of sirens approached, a nerve-rattling soundtrack of urgent catastrophe. Paramedics burst through the front door, medical kits in hand. One of them, a short-haired woman named Gina, knelt beside Leonard, quickly attaching electrodes to check his vitals. "Sir, can you hear me? How long has he been like this?" Helen's eyes darted, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Just a minute or two. He collapsed after—" Leonard tried to speak again, forcing out a whisper. "Helen betrayed me." His eyes slid closed as a paramedic put an oxygen mask over his face. Helen covered her mouth, sobbing quietly, the realization of her secret's impact pressing down like a crushing weight. In a whirlwind of motion, they got Leonard onto a gurney, carrying him through the front yard. Neighbors peered out windows, alarmed by the ambulance's flashing lights. Helen followed, heart hammering, mind a blur. She could barely register what was happening beyond the deafening fear that she might lose him entirely. As the paramedics loaded Leonard inside, he drifted in and out of consciousness. Helen reached for his hand, tears dripping onto the ambulance floor. He rasped a single word before succumbing to the haze of shock and pain. Betrayal. The sterile brightness of the hospital corridor surrounded Leonard like a harsh spotlight. He was wheeled in on a stretcher by the paramedics, monitors flashing numbers that reflected his precarious condition. The medical team at St. Matthew's Hospital recognized him. He'd been here not long ago for his initial heart attack. Helen chased after the gurney, calling his name, but her pleas went unanswered. Her voice echoed off the walls of the ER, leaving her breathless with desperation. Kevin Cross, Leonard's friend and physician, arrived moments later, alerted by the frantic phone call he'd received. "What happened?" Kevin demanded, guiding Helen away from the chaotic triage area. Helen's eyes brimmed with tears. "He overheard something I can't explain right now. He collapsed. Please, Kevin, help him." Kevin offered a tight nod and hurried to join the team working on Leonard. Helen was left behind in the stark waiting area, fluorescent lights making her feel exposed, like her guilt was on display for everyone to see. She sank onto a stiff plastic chair, face buried in her hands. Time stretched taut, every second a reminder of how quickly life can shatter. After what felt like an eternity, Kevin stepped out, scrubs stained with sweat and anxious tension. "He's stable for now," Kevin said, voice low. "He didn't have a second full-blown heart attack, but the stress made him collapse. His heart's under tremendous strain." Relief and dread tangled in Helen's chest. She stood, wanting to race to Leonard's side, but Kevin held up a hand. "Helen," He doesn't want to see you right now. His emotional state is critical." The gravity in Kevin's voice was undeniable. Helen's lips quivered. I understand, but maybe if I just—" Kevin shook his head. "No, for his sake. Let's keep you apart until he calms down. Whatever's going on—" He paused, reading her anguished expression. "He's clearly in a state of shock and heartbreak. We can't risk spiking his stress levels further." Helen nodded numbly, helpless tears falling. She couldn't undo the words Leonard had heard. She couldn't unmake Dominic's presence in her life. The ER around her buzzed with everyday tragedies, nurses hurrying with IVs, families whispering about accidents, beeping machinery charting pulses and respirations. But Helen felt isolated in her own personal calamity. Not long after, she spotted Marcus and Noah hurrying into the waiting area. She realized with a jolt she hadn't even thought to call them. Someone else must have. Her sons looked pale and alarmed. "Mom," Marcus hissed. "What's going on? Dad collapsed? Is he okay?" Helen swallowed, casting a helpless glance at Kevin. "He's stable, but the stress caused a near breakdown." Noah's features twisted with worry. Stress from what? He was doing better. She couldn't form the words to explain. She knew if she revealed the truth, her affair with Dominic, it would break them, or at least break their trust. Instead, she choked out, "It's complicated. He overheard something and it triggered a horrible reaction." Marcus eyed her suspiciously, something dark flickering behind his concern. "Mom, if you know what caused this, you need to tell us." Helen shivered. I just can't. Not right now. He needs rest." Noah grabbed his mother's hand gently but firmly. "Mom, you look like you're about to collapse. Sit down." He guided her toward a chair, while Marcus pulled Kevin aside for more information. In the hours that followed, Helen was left in limbo. She wandered the corridors, glancing into the partially closed blinds of Leonard's ICU room, where she saw only the outlines of doctors and nurses moving about. She longed to step inside, to take his hand, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But her phone remained silent. No call came allowing her in. Late that evening, Kevin reappeared, hooking a stethoscope around his neck. "He's conscious but refuses to see you, Helen," he said gently. "He wants time. I suggest you go home, try to rest. Come back tomorrow." Helen's heart twisted painfully. "He said that?" Kevin nodded, pressing his lips into a thin line. "Look, let's give him space. The emotional shock on top of his cardiac recovery is a powder keg. Another meltdown could be catastrophic." She forced herself to nod. Her mind drifted to memories of Leonard's kindness, his unwavering dedication, the father of her children, the man who loved her more deeply than anyone. Now she stood on the brink of losing him for good, and she had only herself to blame. Marcus and Noah returned from a brief coffee run, styrofoam cups in hand. Helen broke the news that Leonard didn't want visitors, particularly not her. Marcus's jaw tensed, and Noah looked away, expression clouded by confusion. "I'll stay here tonight," Marcus said, a quiet resolve in his tone. "Noah, take Mom home. Dad's got me if he needs anything." Helen wanted to protest, but the weight of her guilt and exhaustion held her silent. She managed a nod and gathered her things. On the drive home, Noah cast her occasional glances, though he said nothing. The hum of the road under the tires felt eerie, like a lullaby of regret. At the house, Helen climbed out of the car, her limbs heavy. Noah locked up, turned off the porch light, and retreated to his old room. Helen remained in the dark living room, the same place Leonard had collapsed. She sank into the recliner where he'd once sat, ignoring the leftover mug of herbal tea on the side table. In the silent gloom, Helen trembled as the realization sank in. She might have caused the man she once promised to love forever to break both body and heart. And as tears trickled down her cheeks, one desperate thought repeated in her mind, "I don't know if there's any way back from this." 2 days passed before Leonard was discharged again, and by then the tension had grown to a suffocating pitch. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds as Kevin Cross carefully helped Leonard out of his car in front of the Grayson home. An icy wind rattled the branches of the old oak tree in the yard, as if reflecting the brittle emotional state inside the house. Helen was waiting by the door, hands twisting anxiously. The moment she saw Leonard, her eyes filled with longing and dread. He stepped onto the porch with Kevin's assistance, expression distant. The lines on his face seemed etched deeper, a reflection of the betrayal he'd felt. "Honey," Helen began softly, voice quivering, "let me help." Leonard shook his head, jaw tight. "No," he ground out. "I can manage." Kevin cleared his throat. "Leonard, do you want me to come inside for a bit? Make sure you're settled?" Leonard offered a tense nod. "Just until I'm steady." He refused Helen's extended arm, choosing to lean on Kevin's shoulder as they moved into the living room. Helen trailed behind, feeling her heart hammer. She wanted to reach out, to soothe him, to beg for forgiveness, but he radiated a wall of anger and sorrow that kept her at bay. When Leonard finally eased onto the couch, Kevin gave Helen a meaningful glance. She read it as a quiet suggestion. Try to talk, but tread gently. Then Kevin murmured his goodbyes, promising to check in later. The front door clicked shut, leaving husband and wife in a strained silence. Helen swallowed hard. "Leonard, I'm so sorry." Her voice trembled as she sank onto an armchair opposite him. "I never meant to hurt you. I was just—" He cut her off with a raw fury in his eyes. "I heard everything. Dominic satisfies you. You can't stop." He spat the words as though they were poison. "How long, Helen? How long have you been sleeping with that guy?" Helen's throat tightened. She felt like she might choke on her own guilt. "A few months," she confessed, trembling. "But it only started after your heart attack when I was lonely, stressed, You want to keep excuses?" Leonard's voice surged, though he made an obvious effort to keep calm enough not to strain his heart. "You think because I nearly died, it's an invitation to cheat on me?" Tears welled in her eyes, and she lowered her gaze. "No, it wasn't like that. I love you, Leonard. But after your diagnosis, you had to find someone else to fill the gap?" He let out a mirthless laugh. "Great. I'm sure that helped you cope while I was fighting for my life. Did you find it thrilling?" Helen shook her head, hot tears spilling over. "Please don't say that. It wasn't about thrill. I felt alone. I needed him more than me," Leonard finished, voice dropping. Something broke in his expression, shifting from rage to profound hurt. "Get out if you want to keep it up. I'm not giving you my blessing to bed some other man while you wait for me to get better." Helen lunged forward, tears streaming. "No, I don't want that. I want you. I'll end things. I can do it right now. Just forgive me." "Give me time." Leonard's face darkened, a heartbreak so intense it was almost tangible in the hush of the living room. "I don't know if I can," he whispered. "All I see when I look at you is the woman who broke my heart like it was nothing." Helen sobbed, reaching to clutch his hand. He yanked his arm away, voice trembling with anger. "Pack a bag if you want to see him again, but you can't stay here with me." Stricken, she shook her head. "Leonard, I'm not going anywhere. This is our home." He cut her off, gathering himself to stand. "Then I will." His body wavered unsteadily, but determination set his jaw. He gestured at a small duffel he'd already planned out earlier in the day. "I can't sleep under the same roof, not with you. Not now." Helen cried openly, clasping her hands together like a desperate prayer. "No, please, you're still recovering. You need rest." Leonard's expression hardened. "I need peace. Clearly I won't get it here." He slung the duffel over one shoulder, ignoring the tremor in his hands. "I'll call Marcus or Kevin if I feel worse. Don't follow me." Helen watched, paralyzed as he left the house. The front door slammed, echoing in the emptiness. A choked sob ripped from her chest, knees hitting the floor. She stared at the rug, numb with regret. Footsteps retreated into the distance, and then the roaring engine of Leonard's car faded. The man who'd nearly died from a heart attack who was supposed to be resting had just driven off alone. The night pressed in, shadows swallowing the corners of the living room, making Helen feel as if the walls themselves condemned her. The warehouse district on the east side of town was quiet this late in the evening, streetlights casting pale circles on the deserted roads. Leonard parked in front of a gated complex known as The Shield. A coded keypad buzzed, granting him entry. The rolling gate clattered open, revealing a row of sleek, reinforced units part garage, part private sanctuary. It was a place people rented when they wanted security and solitude. Leonard stepped out of his car, the night air biting at his skin. His heart still pounded erratically, reminding him not to push too far. He inhaled shakily, hoping this haven he'd prepared long ago would grant him peace. Inside Unit 29, Leonard flicked on the overhead lights, revealing a spacious interior with polished concrete floors. A small living area with a worn leather couch and a coffee table greeted him. At the far end, shelves held boxes of personal documents and family keepsakes, some from his father, some from the days he first started at Southeast Aerotech. Breathing heavily, he dragged his duffel inside, then rolled down the garage-style entrance for privacy. Silence enveloped him, broken only by the faint hum of the overhead fluorescence. He sank onto the couch, pressing a hand to his chest to steady his heartbeat. "This is insane," he muttered aloud, voice echoing off the walls. "I should be home recovering." But every time he pictured Helen's face, the betrayal throbbed afresh, a wound deeper than any physical scar. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back. On a small side table rested a digital photo frame, its screen dark. He tapped its power button, and a slideshow flickered to life. Images of the family scrolled by, him and Helen on a Florida beach, a grinning Marcus graduating college, Noah holding up a fish he'd caught, Chloe in a bright summer dress. Each memory was like a dagger of what he'd lost, or what was never truly mine, he thought bitterly. Determined to distract himself, Leonard heaved himself up and strode to a steel filing cabinet. Keys jingled in his pocket as he unlocked it and pulled out a folder labeled Estate Documents. Within it were official papers, some drawn up years ago. His father had always advised him, "Prepare for the worst, Leonard. It's good business." He flipped through them. A trust protecting the family business, living wills, property deeds. He felt a chill, recalling how a lawyer once mentioned these documents could shield him from lawsuits or from a spouse's claims, though back then it was purely hypothetical. Now it felt like a grim prophecy. "Jennifer Shaw," he murmured, seeing his attorney's name on a letterhead. She'd helped him set up these safeguards. Now they might be his path to ensuring Helen couldn't destroy him financially on top of everything else. The thought felt cold and clinical, yet heartbreak overshadowed it. He loved Helen, or rather he'd loved who she was before Dominic. Numbly, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found Jennifer Shaw. This wasn't a call he ever imagined making. With a shaking breath, he dialed. Jennifer answered on the second ring. "Leonard? It's almost midnight. What's going on?" He swallowed, struggling to keep the tremor out of his voice. "I need help. Remember those estate plans and trust documents we discussed? The ones we set up for asset protection?" A short pause crackled over the line. "Yes, of course. Are you all right? You sound exhausted." Leonard dragged a hand over his face. "I've left home. Helen's been unfaithful. It's complicated, but I need to protect myself, the company, everything. My heart's not strong enough to handle this, but I don't see another way." Jennifer's tone softened. "I'm sorry, Leonard. We'll get you through it. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" He gazed around the shield, the starkness of it mirroring the emptiness in his chest. "Yes, I can. I'll rest here tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." They ended the call. Leonard set the phone aside, letting the silence weigh in again. He walked to the corner where a small kitchenette stood. Pouring himself a glass of water, he noticed his trembling hands. The heartbreak was unrelenting, and the physical toll was undeniable. But a flicker of resolve glimmered under it all. He couldn't collapse into despair. He had to see this through. Returning to the couch, he sank into the cushions, mind swirling with anger, sorrow, and a faint undercurrent of relief that he was away from Helen's presence. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, a maddening hum that echoed his unsettled thoughts. "I can't believe it came to this," he brooded. Finally, exhaustion caught up. He tapped the remote for the lights, plunging the unit into darkness except for the faint red glow from a power strip. Lying there, he clutched his phone in case his chest decided to act up, or if the doctor called. But no calls came. The entire world felt too quiet. He glanced once more at the photo frame's last frozen image, Helen, smiling like the perfect wife. A bitter laugh escaped him. Then he switched it off with a click, letting the shadows claim the room. Tomorrow he'd face the lawyers, face the truth he never wanted to accept. Let's see how strong my heart really is, he thought, pain twisting in his chest like a dull knife. A brisk morning wind rustled the magnolia trees in the front yard as Helen Grayson pulled into the driveway of the family home. Clouds scudded across a pale sky, hinting at unsettled weather much like the atmosphere she was about to face. She climbed out of her car, her heart pounding. Ever since Leonard left in anger, the house had felt hollow and foreign. Stepping inside, she dropped her keys on the kitchen counter. Everything was too quiet. With trembling fingers, she grabbed her phone and dialed Chloe. Her daughter picked up on the second ring. "Mom?" Chloe said, sounding cautious. "You okay?" Helen swallowed, tears already threatening. "No, I'm not. Your dad is at the Shield or somewhere. He's not answering my calls. I haven't seen him in days. What do I do?" Chloe's sigh crackled across the line. "Have you tried apologizing again? Or maybe giving him space? Mom, this is huge. You basically confirmed you had an affair." "I know," Helen whispered. "I've lost him, haven't I?" Her voice shook with fear. In the background, a door slammed. Marcus and Noah had just entered. They exchanged quick glances, spotting Helen on the phone, eyes rimmed red. "Mom," Chloe said firmly, "hang in there. I'll call you later." She ended the call. Helen pivoted to see her two sons. Both looked grim, Marcus, the elder, with jaw clenched, and Noah shifting uncomfortably. "Where's Dad?" Marcus asked, tension straining his voice. Helen could only shake her head, tears brimming. He's staying somewhere else." Noah stepped closer, concern etched across his features. "Mom, are the rumors true? About you and some therapist?" Helen's face flushed. She lowered her gaze, nodding miserably. "I never wanted to hurt your father." A painful silence fell. Marcus's eyes blazed with disappointment. "You cheated while he was recovering from a heart attack? How could you?" Tears slipped down Helen's cheeks. "It was never about destroying our family. I was weak." Noah pressed a hand to his forehead. "Mom, this is unbelievable." He exchanged a look with Marcus. Neither brother knew how to reconcile their love for their mother with the betrayal she admitted to. Helen slumped into a dining chair, burying her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry." After a heavy pause, Marcus exhaled. "We're going to see Dad. He won't let you near him, but maybe he'll talk to us." Noah nodded, though heartbreak glimmered in his eyes. "We'll figure out how to help him, and you do whatever you need to do to fix this, if that's even possible." They left, their footsteps echoing through the empty living room. Helen felt the loss acutely. Even her children seemed to be slipping away. Meanwhile, across town at the Shield, Leonard sat on a low bench in his 500-square-foot unit. A small TV murmured in the background, overshadowed by his swirling thoughts. The corrugated metal walls and concrete floor only amplified the sense of isolation. Marcus's knock roused him. "Dad? It's me," called the older son. Leonard set aside a stack of paperwork, some related to the company, others to personal finances. Sliding open the heavy door, he managed a half-smile for Marcus. "Hey, come on in." Marcus stepped inside, eyes roving over the makeshift living space. He spotted a fold-out cot in the corner, a clutter of takeout containers on a makeshift desk. "Dad, this place is hardly comfortable. Are you okay here?" Leonard sighed. "I'm managing. Honestly, I'm more at peace here than I was at home." Then his gaze flickered to a ledger on the desk labeled Southeast Aerotech. "I need you to help me keep the business on track for a while. My head isn't in the right place." Marcus nodded. "I can handle the day-to-day. But Mom's a mess. She says she's sorry." A flicker of pain crossed Leonard's face, though his tone stayed firm. "I can't go back right now, Marcus. You know what she did. I need rest, and that house her presence only piles on stress." Marcus wanted to argue, to say something to fix it, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he placed a few plastic grocery bags on the counter. "We brought you some food, some supplies. Noah's in the car. He wanted to give you space, too." Leonard mumbled a quiet thanks, eyes dropping to the floor. "Thanks, son. I appreciate it." Father and son shared a tense moment of silence. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. "Let us know if you need anything else, Dad. I just want to be sure you're not overdoing it. Leonard's shoulders sagged. I promise. I'm trying to rest, but I won't rest under the same roof as her. Marcus nodded, then moved toward the door. I'll do what you asked at Aerotech. You focus on your health. Leonard escorted him out, and as the metal door clanged shut, a wave of exhaustion pressed down on him. Watching his son leave, he wondered how everything had crumbled so fast. The entire family structure felt on the verge of collapse. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Jennifer Shaw's law firm. The reception area, all polished wood and gleaming chrome, was meant to impress clients. Leonard waited with a hollow feeling in his gut, far from impressed. He dabbed sweat off his brow. He still worried about his heart giving out under stress, but the adrenaline of betrayal fueled him. Soon, Jennifer emerged from a side corridor. She greeted him politely, leading him into a spacious office lined with leather-bound casebooks. "Leonard, come in," she said gently. "I'm sorry about the circumstances." He settled into a leather chair, exhaling shakily. "I'd hoped never to need you for something like this," he admitted, voice heavy. "But Helen's, she's with another man." Jennifer pursed her lips. "I recall you set up a trust a while ago. Let's review it to ensure your assets remain secure." Leonard nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He recounted the entire miserable tale: Helen's distance after his heart attack, her affair with Dominic, and her apparent willingness to keep him on the side until Leonard was healthy enough to meet her needs. The retelling felt like reopening a raw wound. Jennifer's gaze was sympathetic but professional. "Legally, your trust provides strong protection. If you decide on divorce, this will limit how much she can claim. It also ensures the company's continuity. Southeast Aerotech is safely in your name and trust." Leonard's jaw tightened. "I can't forgive her, Jennifer. I tried, but every time I picture them together it makes me nauseous. She even got Chloe to okay it in some twisted way. Now it's too late." Jennifer made a few notes. "We can proceed with divorce papers. Usually we'd explore mediation, but given your health, it might be best to finalize quickly. Avoid prolonged stress." A raw wave of emotion coursed through Leonard, and he fought to keep it from his voice. "I'm not out for vengeance," he said quietly. "But I also won't be a doormat. I can't let her come after the company or put me through more agony." Jennifer offered a reassuring nod. "I understand. Let me prepare the documents. Once you sign, we'll serve her. She can either agree or fight it. But the trust gives us leverage." Leonard ran a hand over his face, remembering a time Helen had been his greatest ally partner in everything. Now he was hiring a lawyer to untangle their lives, turning their marriage into an adversarial legal case. They wrapped up the meeting with Jennifer, promising to email him drafts by the evening. Standing in the bustling downtown street afterward, Leonard looked at the tall buildings and felt strangely disconnected from his own life. It was as if the ground had shifted beneath him, leaving him unmoored. He trudged to his car, heart pounding at the finality of it all. The Grayson house felt emptier than ever. Helen sat in the living room, legs curled under her, phone clutched in her hand. She'd been calling Leonard all morning, voicemails, texts, even short pleas for him to just talk to her. No response. She rubbed her temples. "He's meeting a lawyer," she whispered. The thought kept replaying in her mind like a broken record. One of her friends, Natalie, had overheard rumors about Leonard's appointment with Jennifer Shaw. If that was true, it likely meant only one thing: divorce. She tried calling him once more, straight to voicemail. Tears stung her eyes. Even her children were distant. Marcus and Noah avoided being in the same house with her for long, and Chloe lived across town. She felt completely alone. In desperation, Helen dialed Dominic Fowler, the man who'd started all this chaos. It rang twice before he picked up, sounding rushed. "Helen, I'm in the middle of something." Her voice trembled. "Dominic, do you even care what I'm going through? Leonard's left me. He might file for divorce. Everything's falling apart." There was a pause, and Dominic exhaled heavily. "I'm sorry you're in pain, but Helen, we never promised each other anything more than therapeutic relief, right? Your marriage is your problem, not mine." Hurt and confusion flared in her chest. "Therapeutic relief? Was I just another client to you?" He hesitated. "I told you from the start. My line of work can get complicated if it crosses boundaries. We crossed them. But this was never about a long-term relationship, Helen. I never said I'd leave everything for you. Realizing she stood on the precipice alone, Helen choked back a sob. Fine, she muttered, ending the call with a trembling thumb. The man she'd risked everything for wouldn't even stand by her in her darkest hour. In a swirl of panic, she recalled Leonard's major fear, STDs or any illness that might endanger his fragile health. If she could prove she was clean, maybe that would ease one tiny shred of his anger. So she'd taken the test days ago. Today, the results arrived via email, negative for everything. She printed them out, reading each line twice, relief mixed with desperation. Would this even matter to Leonard now? She waited the rest of the day, pacing the living room, glancing at the silent phone. By sunset, no knock came at the door, no call, not even a text. The emptiness felt like a living creature gnawing at her. She huddled on the couch, holding the STD results in a trembling hand, as if they were a magic talisman that could summon Leonard home. But he didn't come. Darkness fell, leaving Helen curled up in tears, alone with the consequences of her actions. Late the next morning, Helen startled awake on the couch. She'd barely slept, disoriented by the quiet house. The faint hum of traffic outside reminded her the world was still spinning, even if her life felt stalled. Suddenly, the front door creaked open. Her heart leaped. Leonard stood in the entry, looking grim and worn. He glanced around, lips pressed tight. "Leonard!" she gasped, jumping to her feet. The STD papers fluttered from her lap. Rushing to him, she tried to wrap her arms around his shoulders. He stiffened, arms rigid. "Don't," he muttered, sidestepping her. "I'm just here to grab more clothes and files." Helen stared at him, raw yearning in her eyes. "Please, can we talk? Just 5 minutes?" He avoided her gaze, moving down the hallway toward the bedroom. She followed like a shadow, heart pounding. In the bedroom, he pulled a small suitcase from the closet, stuffing it with a few shirts and pairs of pants. Shaken, Helen thrust the printout of her negative test results toward him. "Look," she pleaded. "I'm clean. I'd never expose you to—" Leonard snatched the paper, glancing over it with a cold stare. "What do you expect me to do with this, Helen? Pin it on my wall, celebrate how you at least didn't bring home a disease from that man?" She flinched at his sarcasm, tears brimming. "I'm just trying to show you I wasn't reckless. I never meant for this to get so out of hand." Zip his suitcase closed, crisp and final. He turned to her, eyes burning with hurt. "You told me you needed him until I recovered, like it was some twisted rehab plan for you. Don't you get how sick that sounds?" Helen's chin quivered. I said a lot of things I didn't mean. Please, you have to believe me. I was desperate." Leonard let out a bitter laugh. "Desperate enough to cheat. Spare me the excuses. I have divorce papers drafted. Either you sign them or we go to court." Her lips parted in shock. Though she'd suspected it, hearing the words hit like a punch. "No, Leonard, I'll do anything. I'll end it with Dominic." He cut her off with a slicing gesture. "Too late. I already know the truth. I'm not living in a half-marriage, waiting for you to get bored and jump in his bed again. I deserve better." Helen slid to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm begging you. Don't do this. We built a life together. He yanked open the bedroom door and stepped back into the hall. "That life ended when you brought him into our bed. Or maybe you kept it to his office, who knows?" He shook his head, voice cracking. "I'm done." Frozen in anguish, Helen watched him walk away. She scrambled to her feet, stumbling after him, sobbing. Just as he reached the living room, she grabbed his arm. "Please, Leonard, don't leave!" A flash of rage twisted his features, and he jerked free. "I left the papers on the table," he said, voice trembling with anger and pain. "Sign them, or we'll fight in court. Either way, it's over." Helen collapsed onto the sofa, tears soaking her shirt as Leonard yanked the door open and slammed it behind him. Outside, the engine of his car revved up and faded into the distance. Alone again, Helen spotted a crisp manila envelope on the coffee table. With shaking hands, she picked it up, reading the bold words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Her vision blurred and she clutched the papers to her chest, a silent wail ripping from her throat. The finality was suffocating. An overcast sky draped the city in a muted gray, the air thick with the promise of rain. Inside Unit 29 at the Shield, Leonard Grayson sat at a small wooden desk, surrounded by piles of folders and dusty files. The hum of a portable heater offered the only warmth in the cavernous space. Despite his lingering heart issues, Leonard's gaze burned with purpose. He flipped through a thick binder labeled Company Health Insurance Quarterly Reports. For days, he'd combed these records, determined to find any sign of Dominic Fowler's misconduct. At last, he spotted an anomaly. Repeated claims for physical therapy sessions, billed under Helen's name far more than she could have actually attended. "Here it is," Leonard muttered under his breath, tapping his pen on the suspicious entries. "You don't even try to hide it, do you, Dominic?" He recalled how months ago, Helen mentioned going to Dominic's clinic only once or twice a week, yet the insurance billed daily sessions for nearly the same period. His chest tightened, not from physical pain, but from a surge of grim satisfaction. "He's been milking the system," Leonard thought bitterly, "just like he milked my wife's weaknesses." Gathering the incriminating documents, he dialed Lisa Parker, the HR director at Southeast Aerotech. She answered on the second ring. "Lisa, it's Leonard," he said, voice steady despite his adrenaline. "I'm sending you scans of some health insurance records. I need you to confirm Dominic Fowler has been overcharging the company." Lisa hesitated. "Of course, Mr. Grayson. Are you sure about this?" He nodded, as if she could see him. "Yes. Cross-check everything, and once you have the confirmation, forward the details to me. Immediately." After hanging up, he settled into the metal-framed chair, exhausted yet resolute. The tension of betrayal still gnawed at him, but a glimmer of empowerment pulsed through his veins. This wasn't mere revenge, he told himself it was about justice. Dominic had exploited the company's insurance plan while also exploiting Helen's vulnerability. And if the man lost his professional license in the process, Leonard considered it a fair outcome for a homewrecker. A few hours later, Lisa called back, voice tense with urgency. "Sir, you're correct. Dominic Fowler billed at least 4 times more sessions than were actually documented on the patient logs. The insurance company has already flagged him once for suspicious claims, but nothing concrete until now." Leonard exhaled, scribbling notes as Lisa spoke. "Send all that to my lawyer. I'll have Jennifer Shaw draw up the official complaint to both the insurance board and the state licensing authority." Lisa paused. "Are you sure you want to go all in, Mr. Grayson? This could be a messy legal fight." He thought of Helen's tear-stained face, of how she'd endangered their marriage and his health for Dominic's so-called therapy. His jaw tightened. "Yes, I won't back down." By late afternoon, Leonard fired off an email to Jennifer Shaw, attaching the evidence. He added a short note. Proceed with the ethics complaint against Dominic Fowler. Then, as a final act, he poured himself a small measure of herbal tea he'd sworn off alcohol to protect his heart, and took a reflective sip. "Heart disease might be curable," he murmured to the empty unit. "But heartbreak? That scar runs deeper. And I won't let Dominic walk away unscathed." He closed his eyes, letting the bitterness flood him for a brief moment before forcing it away. Late morning sunlight streaked through the hazy windows of the County Medical Board building, illuminating the sterile hallway where Helen Grayson sat. Her palms were clammy, her knees trembling under a navy skirt. She stared at a wooden door with a brass sign, "Professional Conduct Hearing in Session." The dreadful clang of a gavel sounded from inside. She was here because a formal complaint had been filed against Dominic Fowler. The letter summoning her as a witness arrived a week ago, and her stomach had been in knots ever since. The hearing panel wanted details about her treatments, how often she visited, and what services Dominic performed. Every humiliating detail would be laid bare. At last, a clerk poked her head out. "Mrs. Grayson? We're ready for you." Helen smoothed her skirt with trembling fingers and stepped into a modest hearing room. A panel of 3 stern-faced officials sat at a long table. Dominic was on one side, flanked by a weary-looking lawyer. His gaze flicked to Helen, expression cold and distant. For a moment, she remembered the warmth of his hands, the moments of illicit comfort. Now, it felt like a lifetime ago. "State your name for the record," droned one official. Helen gave it, voice wavering. Question after question followed details of her sessions with Dominic, times, locations, whether Dominic ever requested she sign extra paperwork. Helen's cheeks burned as she admitted that sometimes he'd added additional sessions on days she wasn't even present. Her world felt like it was collapsing. Dominic's lawyer tried to intervene, but the panel pressed on. By the end, Helen was near tears. He said it was standard insurance procedure," she mumbled, head bowed. I believed him." When it was over, she stumbled into the corridor, heart pounding with shame. She'd just confirmed Dominic's malpractice, something that might get him stripped of his license, and she realized Leonard must have orchestrated this. He's making sure Dominic pays for everything. The thought twisted her emotions. Part of her felt Dominic deserved it, but another part felt terrified of Leonard's growing ruthlessness. Word of the scandal spread quickly. Helen's phone buzzed non-stop with acquaintances asking if the rumors were true. She stopped answering. Janet Simpson and her husband Raymond nosy neighbors filled social media with gossip about Helen's secret affair, adding fuel to the scandal. Even old friends avoided her at the grocery store, whispering behind her back. The worst blow came from her own children. Chloe confronted her one evening in a heated argument. "Mom," Chloe said, voice shaky, "this is bigger than just Dad leaving. Everyone knows about Dominic, the fraud, the therapy bills. Why didn't you think about the consequences?" Helen's frustration flared. "You supported me at first, Chloe. You said I had the right to my body." Chloe reddened. "I never said commit insurance fraud or blow up the family. I don't know what I was thinking. Everything's out of hand now." The tension snapped. They shouted accusations back and forth in the living room until Chloe stormed out, tears streaming. That same night, Marcus and Noah sent curt messages saying they needed space. Helen felt her soul cracking under the strain her marriage destroyed, and now her children pulling away. Unable to bear the loneliness, she tried calling Leonard's phone. It went to voicemail. She tried texting him apologies, pleas to meet. Nothing. Not even a refusal. She was truly alone, with no one to confide in. Exhausted and desperate, Helen crumpled onto her bed, mind spinning. She'd lost her husband, respect in the community, and now her connection with her children was fraying. In a moment of heartache, she whispered, "I'm sorry," though no one was there to hear. She realized she had no idea how to fix what she'd broken. The tension in the air felt tangible as Helen arrived at the family court building downtown. A stiff breeze whipped at her coat, and dark clouds threatened a storm. She clutched a thin folder of personal documents, meager evidence of her financial standing, knowing full well she had little to bargain with. Inside a cramped hearing room, Leonard sat at a rectangular table with Jennifer Shaw by his side. The lines of exhaustion etched on his face clashed with the rigid set of his jaw. Helen couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. She slid into the seat opposite, accompanied by a junior legal aide who had offered minimal advice. A judge entered, and the proceedings began. Jennifer laid out the evidence. Helen's admitted adultery, the traumatic emotional impact on Leonard's health, and Dominic's insurance fraud. Each point felt like a hammer blow to Helen's heart. When the judge asked if Helen had any claim on Leonard's personal assets or shares of Southeast Aerotech, Jennifer presented the existing family trust. It clearly placed those assets beyond Helen's reach. Helen's legal aide weakly argued that she deserved a portion of the marital home, but Jennifer countered that it had a hefty mortgage. Helen had refinanced it for personal use. Tears stung Helen's eyes as the judge weighed the situation. The reality sank in. Her hope of walking away financially secure was crumbling. Leonard, half-turned in his seat, refused to glance her way. Finally, the judge spoke with measured calm. "Given the extensive trust protecting Mr. Grayson's assets, Miss Grayson is entitled only to the marital home itself and any associated debt. Additional spousal support is denied because Mr. Grayson is under medical disability and drawing limited income from insurance." Helen's throat constricted, hearing the official pronouncement. The judge concluded, "I thereby approve the dissolution of marriage. As of this date, you are both legally divorced." A murmur passed through the small courtroom. Helen's gaze flicked to Leonard, tears forming. He stared at the table, expression like stone. The bailiff gestured for everyone to exit. On the courthouse steps, Helen clutched the final decree, her breath shaky. She mustered the courage to approach Leonard. So this is it. 30 years gone. He gave her a sidelong glance, pain flickering in his eyes. It was gone the moment you betrayed me. Then, without another word, he turned and limped away with Jennifer at his side. A thick cluster of clouds overhead finally broke, sending cold raindrops scattering on the sidewalk. Helen stood there, soaked and trembling. The tears mingled with rain on her cheeks, her heart pounding in numb acceptance. Their marriage of 3 decades had ended in a matter of minutes, sealed by a court official's stamp. She'd never felt so alone. Less than a month later, Helen found herself staring at an empty living room, the walls scuffed where paintings once hung. Piles of boxes sat by the door, half-labeled with black marker. She'd sold the house at a loss her bills had piled too high, and the monthly mortgage felt suffocating after losing Leonard's support. A wave of sorrow washed over her, recalling how she once called this place her dream home. Now, she was forced to move into a modest one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. The management had been wary until she showed proof of stable employment. She'd recently taken a job as a home aide at a local senior care facility, ironic, she thought bitterly, given her background in basic nursing. Yet the hours were grueling, and the pay barely covered rent. Still, it was all she had left. She dragged the last cardboard box to her beat-up sedan, shoulders aching. Pausing at the mailbox, she flipped through junk mail and official notices. One letter from the insurance board detailed the final action against Dominic Fowler, his license revoked for unethical billing practices. Another from the insurance company demanded that he repay thousands in claims. Helen felt no satisfaction, only a dull emptiness. Dominic's out of my life for good, she thought, and I'm left with nothing. At her new apartment, the musty smell of the hallway greeted her. Inside, the cramped living area and peeling wallpaper reflected her new reality. She arranged some second-hand furniture, feeling a pang of loss for the once lavish decor of her marital home. Loneliness crowded in, made sharper by the silence. She'd tried calling Marcus and Noah, but they were distant, polite, but clearly hurt. Chloe, too, seemed racked with guilt and frustration, leaving only short, tense phone calls. Days passed. Helen poured herself into work, changing adult diapers, feeding bedridden seniors, comforting them at night. She recognized the sorrow in their eyes, mirrored in her own. At least her job let her care for others. It was a faint reminder of the compassion she once cherished before everything spiraled out of control. One evening, slumped on her worn couch after a double shift, she picked up an old family photo in a broken frame. It showed Leonard smiling. Flanked by their 3 children, Marcus had just graduated, Noah was still a teen, and Chloe beamed with youthful confidence. Tears slipped down Helen's cheeks. She whispered, "I'm sorry," as though the photo might hear. She mourned what she'd lost, not just a husband, but the respect of her children, the comfort of a stable life, and the illusion of happiness. In place of hope, only shame and regret remained. Sometimes she texted Chloe, trying for small talk, rarely getting more than brief replies. She'd asked Marcus about dropping by, but he always had an excuse. Noah avoided her altogether. A pang of anguish struck Helen's chest each time she realized how thoroughly she'd alienated them. Late that night, after finishing a cup of instant noodles, she curled up on the couch, hugging a throw pillow. Outside her window, the flicker of a street lamp cast shifting shadows on the wall. She stared into the darkness, recalling the day she first married Leonard, full of naive dreams. Now those dreams lay scattered like shards of broken glass. At length, Helen retrieved the faded photo again, tears blurring her vision. She let them fall, each drop a testament to her regrets. She had no idea what the future held, a murky, solitary road, but as sorrow weighed on her, she realized she had only one choice. Somehow she had to keep moving, even if it meant walking that road alone. A soft glow broke through the high windows of the Shield as Leonard Grayson rose early, slipping on a pair of sneakers. The vast interior of his personal unit concrete floor, metal walls had once felt cold, like a fortress to shield him from the world. But this morning, it held a quiet serenity. He checked his heart rate monitor on his wrist. nodding in approval at the steady beat. Each day he ventured a little further on his path of physical recovery. He began his routine of gentle stretches, arms lifting above his head in slow arcs. A faint ache lingered in his chest, a reminder of the heart attack that had upended everything. Yet he took solace in how far he'd come. No more dizzy spells, no more daily chest pains. After a few laps around the open space, he grabbed a bottle of water from the small kitchenette, gazing outside where morning light glinted off the security fence. Later that afternoon, Leonard rolled up the unit's overhead door to set up a weekend tailgate, gathering a tradition he used to enjoy before his health scare. A few folding chairs, a portable grill, and a cooler of soft drinks gave the concrete driveway a casual, celebratory air. The crisp autumn breeze carried a faint hint of charcoal. Around noon, a few old friends arrived, including Rick, a co-worker at Southeast Aerotech, and Kevin Cross, the friend who'd saved his life that fateful night. They greeted Leonard warmly, relief evident in their smiles. "Man," Rick exclaimed, patting Leonard's shoulder. "Look at you back in action. You sure you can handle hosting us like old times?" Leonard returned a slight grin. "Doctor's orders are to stay active, not hide away. Besides," he gestured at the small grill, "I'm only cooking chicken and veggies, nothing too crazy." Kevin chuckled, handing Leonard a bag of fresh produce. "Better than the greasy burgers we used to inhale? Glad you're taking care of yourself?" The men settled in folding chairs, turning on the pregame show from a small TV propped on a workbench. As they bantered over football stats, Leonard caught his reflection in a polished steel tool cabinet. He looked a bit leaner, a bit older, but there was a new light in his eyes, perhaps an acceptance of the scars, both physical and emotional. A few hours later, after the game ended, the group cleaned up. While Rick hauled trash to the dumpster and Kevin folded chairs, Leonard noticed a familiar sedan pulling up. Marcus stepped out, wearing a business-casual sweater. He approached his father with a careful smile. "Dad," Marcus said, "sorry I'm late. Had a morning meeting at the company?" Leonard's chest tightened briefly with a mix of pride and lingering sorrow. "No problem, son. How's Aerotech?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "Better than expected. Sales are up this quarter. We're building on your legacy." For a moment, father and son exchanged a quiet understanding. They both knew how deeply the Grayson name mattered at Southeast Aerotech, and how recent turmoil threatened to overshadow decades of family history. "I appreciate your hard work," Leonard said, voice huskier than usual. "I'm not quite ready to be back full-time, but I'll step in more soon." Marcus gave a small nod. "Take your time to heal." Then, more softly, he added, "Noah's been asking about Mom. He misses how things used to be, but he's confused." Leonard's gaze flickered with pain. "I understand. Let's give it time. We all need time." Marcus sighed, gratitude and sadness mingling in his expression. "All right, Dad. I'll keep you posted." Once alone, Leonard stood by the half-closed garage door. A light wind ruffled his hair, and he squinted at the clear blue sky overhead. The future still felt uncertain, but he could breathe easier now physically and mentally. His heart was steadier, his mind clearer, and though the past wounds might never fully vanish, he was determined to rebuild his life. He turned back to tidy the leftover folding chairs, an unspoken mantra echoing in his thoughts. "I need to learn how to live for myself again." A quiet sense of resolve settled over him, as open and blue as the sky above. A swirl of lively chatter and laughter filled the open-air terrace of Gareth's Sports Bar, located in a renovated riverside warehouse. Leonard rarely ventured to big social events these days, but Kevin had insisted he join in on a casual alumni gathering. Soft music played from overhead speakers, mingling with the hum of conversation. TV screens dotted the walls, showing baseball highlights. Leonard made his way to the bar, moving with more confidence than he had just a month ago. He thanked the bartender for a glass of sparkling water and scanned the crowd, a mix of acquaintances from various local business circles and old community sports clubs. "Leonard," Kevin called, weaving through the throng, "let me introduce you to someone." He guided Leonard toward a corner where a petite brunette in her mid-40s was chatting with a small group. "This is Cassandra Miles, an old friend of mine from med school days. She's a physical therapist, one of the good ones," he joked, shooting Leonard a pointed grin. Cassandra extended her hand, eyes warm. "I've heard plenty about you, Mr. Grayson. So nice to finally meet the man behind Southeast Aerotech." Leonard suppressed a twinge of discomfort at the mention of therapy, mindful of his history with Dominic. He offered a polite smile. "Likewise. And please, call me Leonard." Kevin stepped aside, letting them talk. Cassandra sipped her iced tea, glancing at Leonard's wrist monitor. "I see you're sporting a heart rate tracker. I've worked with many patients in cardiac rehab. Are you recovering from something serious?" Leonard inhaled, steadying himself. "I had a heart attack months ago, then went through a rough patch. But I'm improving." Her gaze softened sympathetically. "I'm glad you're here. It's a sign you're feeling better." They drifted into casual conversation about local sports. Leonard joked about how he used to be an avid tennis player until his health slowed him down. Cassandra teased that if he ever needed a more trustworthy therapist, she'd happily point him in the right direction. "So, no shady billing schemes?" Leonard quipped, surprised at his own sardonic humor. She laughed, a gentle, reassuring sound. "None. I keep my practice squeaky clean, promise." He relaxed, appreciating her easygoing manner. As the gathering continued, they discovered a shared enjoyment of watching minor league baseball and an interest in local charitable programs for underprivileged kids. Cassandra volunteered weekly at a community center. Leonard recalled how, in his earlier philanthropic days, he'd donate to youth engineering clubs. When the event wound down, Kevin reappeared to say his farewells. Cassandra offered Leonard her business card, though not in a pushy manner, just a friendly gesture. "No pressure," she said with a genuine smile. "I just like connecting with folks who care about the community." He slipped the card into his wallet, heart fluttering with a cautious spark. It felt foreign yet oddly welcome, a sign that maybe, beyond the heartbreak and bitterness, there was life to be lived. As Leonard left Gareth's sports bar, the evening air felt crisp and bracing. Despite the raw memories still etched into his heart, he found himself hopeful, not ready to jump into anything, but open to the idea that the future could hold more than just regret. Driving back to the Shield, he caught himself smiling faintly. "I'm not rushing," he told himself, "but there's a warmth I haven't felt in a long time." A warm hush settled in the car as he navigated the city streets, mind stirring with the possibility of healing beyond physical recovery, maybe even a second chance at happiness. A cool morning sun bathed the sleek exterior of Southeast Aerotech. Rows of employees' cars lined the lot, and the faint rumble of machinery vibrated from the manufacturing wing. Leonard stepped out of his Lexus, straightening his jacket. He'd promised Marcus he would attend a brief meeting to discuss new contracts, a small step toward returning to leadership. His heart pounded not from stress, but from a renewed sense of purpose. As he approached the glass doors, he noticed a lone figure standing off to the side, Helen, looking pale and tired in a simple blouse and slacks. Her eyes found him instantly, desperation flickering on her face. He paused, uncertain, then stepped forward. "Leonard," she managed, voice low. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" He surveyed her appearance. She seemed worn, as though carrying the weight of many sleepless nights. The old ache tugged at him, but he steeled himself. "All right. I'm listening." They moved to a corner by the building's foyer, away from the main flow of employees. Helen fiddled with her hands, face etched with regret. I've tried calling. You never answered." Leonard exhaled. "I needed distance. We both know why." She took a shaky breath, eyes brimming with tears. "I know. You have every reason to hate me. But I want you to know I'm truly sorry. Not just for hurting you, but for destroying our family." He studied her, memories flickering, the love they once shared, the fury and betrayal when he found out about Dominic, her sobbing pleas. The pain still existed, but it no longer crushed him. "Helen," he said quietly, "I don't hate you, but we can't go back to what we were." Her tears spilled over. "I understand I ruined that, but maybe can you forgive me? Even if we're not married anymore?" Leonard's gaze shifted to the pavement. Forgiveness was a big word. He recalled his hours of therapy, both cardiac and mental, realizing resentment only weighed down his heart. I forgive you, he said finally, voice steady. But the love we had, it's gone. Too much has happened. Helen's shoulders slumped, relief and sorrow mingling. Thank you, she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm glad you're better. I wish I could change the past. He nodded, heart aching with old wounds. Me too. Then, noticing movement in the distance, he saw Marcus stepping outside, spotting them. Marcus froze, confusion on his features, then turned away to give them privacy. Helen caught that moment, a flash of hurt crossing her face. Her children were still distant. Gathering her composure, she managed a wobbly smile. I'm happy you're recovering, physically and emotionally. You deserve peace. Leonard watched as she wiped her tears, the final traces of the life they once shared slipping between them. I hope you find yours as well. She nodded, chest heaving with silent sobs. Then, sensing she'd said all she could, Helen pivoted on trembling legs and walked away. Her figure swayed, almost collapsing in heartbreak, but she managed to keep upright. Marcus, standing further off, briefly locked eyes with Helen. His expression pained, then looked aside, unable to face her. Leonard felt a heavy pang in his chest, not from cardiac strain, but from the finality of this parting. He inhaled deeply, allowing a sense of calm acceptance to settle in. At least there's closure, he thought. We can both move on, separately. He turned toward the entrance, posture straighter, feeling the chill morning breeze nudge him forward. There was no going back, only ahead. Early dawn light filtered through the high windows of Leonard's unit at the Shield, casting long rectangles of gold on the concrete floor. He methodically packed a few personal items into a sturdy storage box, old documents, pictures, mementos he'd kept during his tumultuous separation. His strength had returned in both body and spirit. Each movement felt purposeful, unburdened. After snapping the box closed, he stepped to a mirror on the wall. His reflection showed a man with faint lines of strain around the eyes, but also a subtle spark of determination. Over the past weeks, his cardiologist had approved him for moderate exercise, lifting heavier objects, and gradually resuming a normal life. The healing was almost complete. He glanced at a photo pinned to a corkboard. Marcus, Noah, and Chloe, all smiling from a Thanksgiving years ago. A bittersweet smile tugged at his lips. The rifts in the family still lingered. Helen's betrayal had reshaped their dynamics, but he held on to hope that time would mend some wounds. Already Noah had texted him about grabbing lunch soon, hinting at possible reconciliation. With a final survey of the unit, Leonard gathered up the last few knickknacks. A faint sense of nostalgia welled up. The Shield had been both sanctuary and prison, harboring him through heartbreak. Now it felt like a launch pad to a life rebuilt on honesty and self-respect. Slipping into his car, an older Lexus he'd come to appreciate anew, he pulled onto the main road. The sky blossomed into gentle shades of pink and orange. The city was waking up. Shops opening, morning joggers huffing along sidewalks, school buses rumbling past. Leonard breathed in the subtle bustle, bracing himself for the day's tasks. At a red light, he reflected on the conversation he'd had with Marcus about returning to Southeast Aerotech more regularly. His new plan: to mentor younger engineers, reduce daily stress, and keep the business thriving without sacrificing his health or mental well-being. It was a fresh start, one he felt ready for. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat. A quick glance revealed a text from Cassandra Miles, the friendly physical therapist he'd met. Morning, Leonard. Hope you're feeling strong today. Would love to catch up over coffee if you're free. His heart fluttered lightly, a quiet thrill. It wasn't a promise of romance, but a gentle invitation that reminded him life went on, and good people still wanted to be part of his story. Pulling into a local cafe parking lot, Leonard noticed an open table near the window. He parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment. A fleeting thought of Helen crossed his mind, but instead of pain, he felt something akin to acceptance. He'd walked through the fire, and though the scars remained, they no longer defined him. Gathering up a small briefcase, he stepped out of the car, locking it behind him. The crisp morning air felt bright and full of possibility. Approaching the cafe entrance, he spared one last look at the sky, which now shone a clear, bold blue. He inhaled, exhaled, and quietly murmured, I'm ready. In that moment, the door chimed open, the aroma of fresh coffee drifting out. Leonard Grayson, once broken by betrayal and heartbreak, now ventured inside heart steady, spirit resilient. The future lay before him like an open road, with all its unknown turns and surprises, but also with hope and a renewed sense of self.